Canada is considering joining the US Golden Dome defense system, but the question remains, can they trust Trump after the tariffs? Canada is on the verge of a military decision that could reshape its relationship with the US for years. Prime Minister Mark Carney mentions, "It's something that we are looking at and something that has been discussed at a high level," when referring to talks about joining Trump's Golden Dome missile defense system. But, after the recent trade war, Trump's tariffs, and even his public suggestion that Canada would be better off as a US state, just how much trust is really left? The stakes here are massive. The Golden Dome's initial price tag is $175 billion, but the nonpartisan Congressional Budget Office estimates costs could reach $542 billion over 2 decades. Experts are questioning both the feasibility and the logic of buying into a project with this much uncertainty. So, what exactly is Canada being asked to sign up for? We'll watch the clip of Trump's Golden Dome announcement later in the video, but first, let's dive deeper into Trump's Golden Dome plan. Trump's Golden Dome missile defense system is supposed to be a real game changer. The Pentagon claims it will use space-based sensors and interceptors to track and destroy hypersonic and ballistic missiles, threats that current US defenses can't reliably counter. Lockheed Martin, one of the main contractors, says they're working on combining existing defense technology with new innovations, including space-based components. They point to their experience with the Missile Defense Agency's command and control networks. But, well, much of the core technology, especially the space-based interceptors, remains in development. The costs, they are staggering. The nonpartisan Congressional Budget Office estimates that just the space-based elements of Golden Dome could cost $542 billion over 20 years. That's not the full system, just the parts in orbit. The Trump administration's initial $25 billion request barely scratches the surface. Some analysts warn that the total price tag could climb far higher, especially when factoring in maintenance, upgrades, and integration with other systems. For comparison, Canada's entire annual federal budget is less than half that CBO estimate. There's also international backlash. China's foreign ministry warned that the system heightens the risk of space becoming a battlefield and could trigger an arms race. They see the US push for space-based missile defenses as a move that threatens global security, not just US interests. If the US puts interceptors in orbit, countries like Russia and China are likely to respond with their own space-based weapons. That's not just about defense, it's about escalation. The Pentagon says Golden Dome will work alongside existing missile defense systems, creating a layered network that includes ground-based interceptors and sensors. They plan to roll out the system in phases, focusing first on areas facing the greatest threat, and promise close coordination with NORAD, US Northcom, and US Spacecom. But history is full of ambitious missile defense projects that never delivered. The 1980s Star Wars Strategic Defense Initiative collapsed under technical and budget problems, and experts today, like those cited by Reuters and Al Jazeera, question whether Golden Dome can overcome the same hurdles by 2029. They warn of serious risks. The technology may not work as promised, and the costs could spiral out of control. So, while the Pentagon pitches this as a necessary leap in defense, the reality is far more complicated. That's the backdrop as Canada weighs its options, especially after recent US trade moves. For Canada, the calculus goes beyond missile defense. The government's real concern is maintaining its security ties and economic stability while navigating US demands. Prime Minister Carney's office confirmed that discussions on the Golden Dome are part of a wider set of security talks that include NORAD modernization and related defense initiatives. This isn't just about a new technology, it's about whether Canada can keep NORAD running smoothly and avoid disruptions that could hit everything from defense to trade. The US has made it clear that interoperability is a priority. Ambassador Pete Hoekstra stated that if Canada flies a different fighter jet than the US, it could threaten the seamless operation of NORAD. He didn't issue a direct ultimatum, but the message was obvious. The US expects Canada to align its defense purchases with American interests. For Ottawa, that means every procurement decision, from jets to missile systems, carries weight far beyond the sticker price. Trade policy adds another layer. When Trump hit Canadian exports with 25% tariffs, energy was mostly spared, facing only a 10% rate. That wasn't an accident. Over 70% of Canada's oil exports go to the US, and the White House knows exactly how important that market is for Alberta's economy. The energy exemption was a calculated move. Washington kept the door open for Canadian crude while squeezing other sectors. The implication is clear. Canada's willingness to cooperate on defense could help keep those energy tariffs in check. This puts Carney in a bind. If he pushes back on US defense plans, there's a risk that Washington could target Canada's most valuable exports. But if he goes along, he's tying Canada's defense strategy even closer to an unpredictable partner. The NORAD infrastructure is old, and both sides know it needs upgrades. Since 1958, Canada and the US have modernized NORAD together. But now the US is tying that process to bigger, more expensive projects like Golden Dome. Carney's team sees joining as a way to secure Canada's place at the table, and maybe protect the country's economic interests in the process. The dilemma is stark. Canada relies on the US for both security and trade, but each new deal seems to come with more strings attached. As the government weighs its options, the pressure is mounting, not just in Ottawa, but across the country. Public reaction to the idea of Canada joining the Golden Dome missile defense system has been charged, with skepticism showing up in headlines and on social media feeds. Canadian media reports point to a divided landscape. Many voters question why Ottawa would tie itself to a massive US-led project so soon after the trade war and tariff disputes. On talk radio and in the comment sections, people ask whether this is about defending Canada or just writing another check for American defense contractors. The political divide is clear. The Liberals are trying to frame the deal as a necessary step for national security, but opposition parties are not buying it. NDP and Conservative leaders have both raised concerns, publicly questioning the logic of deepening military ties with the US after recent economic tensions. CBC News reported that critics from both parties called for a full parliamentary review before any commitment. They argue that the government is moving too fast, and that Canadians deserve a clear answer on what the country is actually signing up for.
I promised the American people that I would build a cutting-edge missile defense shield to protect our homeland from the threat of foreign missile attack. And that's what we're doing. Today I'm pleased to announce that we have officially selected an architecture for this state-of-the-art system that will deploy next-generation technologies across the land, sea, and space, including space-based sensors and interceptors. And Canada has called us and they want to be a part of it. So we'll be talking to them. They want to have protection also.
Mr. President, add this to the long and growing list of promises made and promises kept. Ultimately, this right here, the Golden Dome for America, is game changer. It's a generational investment in the security of America and Americans. President Reagan 40 years ago cast the vision for it. The technology wasn't there. Now it is, and you're following through to say we will protect the homeland from cruise missiles, ballistic missiles, hypersonic missiles, drones, whether they're conventional or nuclear.
Regional interests add another layer. Communities that depend on NORAD bases and defense contracts, like those near Cold Lake, tend to be more supportive. U.S. Air Force General Gregory Guillot, who oversees NORAD, welcomed the idea of more Canadian participation, which local leaders highlight as a reason to stay involved. But in major cities and university towns, skepticism runs deep. Much of the debate centers on whether Canada should spend billions on a system that experts say is still unproven. The fiscal question is everywhere. News outlets have run editorials warning about the risk of cost overruns and pointing to past U.S. missile defense projects that never delivered on their promises. There's concern that Canada could end up on the hook for a share of a system that balloons far past its initial price tag. The government's own internal polling, according to leaks reported by the Globe and Mail, suggests that suburban voters, the ones who decide elections, are wary of committing to such a huge open-ended project. All of this is happening as the government tries to reassure the public and its own MPs that the deal is about modernizing NORAD, not just following Washington's lead. But the doubts aren't going away. The last time a US president pitched a space-based missile shield, Canada faced a similar debate, and the outcome wasn't what Washington wanted. When people talk about Trump's Golden Dome, they can't ignore the echoes from the Reagan era. Back in 1983, President Reagan pitched the Strategic Defense Initiative, SDI or Star Wars, as a way to build a shield in space against nuclear missiles. The plan was to use satellites, lasers, and interceptors to shoot down incoming warheads before they could reach North America. It sounded revolutionary, but the reality was different. SDI never got off the ground. The National Research Council and later reviews found the program was abandoned after years of ballooning costs and technical hurdles that couldn't be solved. The technology just wasn't ready, and the price tag kept rising. Now, the same core idea is back. Trump's Golden Dome wants to put interceptors and sensors in space to track and destroy missiles, including hypersonic ones. The initial price tag is $175 billion, but the Congressional Budget Office says the space-based parts alone could hit $542 billion over 20 years. That's far more than Canada spends on defense modernization, and it doesn't include the inevitable overruns. The American Physical Society, which studied SDI, warned that even a small-scale missile attack would be hard to stop. The basic problem hasn't changed. In the mid-course phase, when warheads and decoys are both flying through space, it's nearly impossible to tell them apart. Decoys travel at the same speed as real warheads in a vacuum, so even the best sensors struggle to distinguish one from the other. Today, tracking technology is better, and space-based sensors can spot launches faster than anything from the 1980s. But the challenge isn't just seeing the threat, it's stopping it. Shashank Joshi from The Economist points out that space-based interceptors face huge engineering and timing problems. Most experts doubt the Golden Dome will be ready by Trump's 2029 deadline, especially since hypersonic interceptors aren't expected until the mid-2030s. The Pentagon says American industry can solve these issues, but that's what Reagan's team said too, before SDI was scrapped. There's also the arms race factor. When Reagan pitched SDI, the Soviets called it a provocation. Now, China's foreign ministry warns that Golden Dome could destabilize global security and push adversaries to develop new weapons to get around the shield. The technology gap is smaller now. China has hypersonic glide vehicles and countermeasures that didn't exist in the 1980s. Canada turned down SDI because the tech was unproven and the costs were out of control. Now, Ottawa faces pressure to buy into a reboot with the same risks. Given the history of SDI's failure and Golden Dome's technical hurdles, should Canada opt in or wait for proven results? As Canada weighs joining the Golden Dome missile defense system, the decision comes down to cost, technical feasibility, and political trust. Critics frame the move as subcontracting sovereignty, arguing that it ties Canada's defense strategy even closer to Washington at a time when trade tensions remain fresh. Supporters counter that NORAD modernization is overdue and that Canada's security architecture needs to keep pace with new threats. With no clear deadline and deep divisions in public opinion, the government faces a complex calculation. Let us know in the comments how you'd weigh Canada's security needs against cost and trust issues, and subscribe for more in-depth analysis on Canadian-US defense relations.